Hello everyone, welcome back to the latest lecture session. We started discussing about municipal solid waste and the current scenario and the adverse effects. And I believe we were just trying to understand what are the different characteristics and such. Why? Obviously, if you want to do or something about it or manage it, you need to understand the kind of waste it is, right? So I believe we looked at this graph, but one aspect is that mostly we are dumping biodegradable waste and considerable fraction is of the construction debris and the other is relatively inert, not inert maybe I guess, aspects or waste that can be recycled, let's say, right. So that's something to keep in mind. Municipal solid waste, again, quantum of municipal solid waste generated tons per day, I guess, right, tons per day. So obviously Delhi or again metropolitan and the relatively more urbanized cities are at the higher end. This is not what we say surprising, but one aspect I want to mention is that even when people were trying to understand what to do with the construction and demolition debris or thus waste and such, the issue is that there are no numbers out there or data rather out there which is relatively accurate, right? Most of them are estimates and that too poor estimates, if I may say so. Let me not say poor estimates, not accurate estimates, and there is wide, what do we say, variation between one estimate to the other. So that typically always affects your, what do we say, ability to manage the relevant waste, let's say. So problems due to solid waste, quick, what do we say, recap, type of waste and approximate time it takes to degenerate the waste. So organic waste within a week or two if left alone, okay. No other aspects that can, what do we say, lead to toxicity to the microbes or such, then a week or two. But keep in mind that putrefaction or decomposition starts within 12 hours or let's say 8 hours. So if you want to be an entrepreneur and collect it, you need to collect the waste within 12 hours, because if you let it stay for 24 hours, obviously you're going to have sogging and anaerobic decomposition will already start, let's say, and people won't want to use that, or the workers will typically not be able to handle that. So paper 30 days max, cotton cloth around half a year or let's say 2 to 5 months, wood considerable time, that's why we are buying a shredder, or we bought it rather, at least in IT Roorkee. Woolen items again 1 year, considerable item, and again metal, considerable hundreds of years. Plastic bag, as of now we have no estimate when they will be degraded, and glass bottles again obviously I guess, right. So you understand the level of what do we say, complex nature of our waste, and you see that this we can easily degrade, and all these either can be used as a resource or you can derive good energy from them. But because we are mixing everything, that's where lies the way issue. That's the case in India, let's say, right. So that's something for you to keep in mind. So when you dump all this in a municipal solid waste dump, what's happening out here, right? You are also decreasing the rate of degradation of these organic waste, but you are filling up your what do we say, valuable space with all these materials out here, right, which are going to probably not degrade within a generation's time. So present scenario, except in metropolitan cities, solid waste management is taken care of by a health officer who is assisted by the engineering department, and typically we have 2 to 3 workers or sweepers per 1000 residents served, and they are poorly paid, and therein lies the issue again. It's only 2 to 3 workers per 1000 residents, and urban local bodies or municipalities spend from 5 to 25% of their budget on solid waste management. Obviously that's a remarkably high amount. Again, keep in mind that solid waste management, we are not really managing it, we are just looking at right now collection, transport and dumping it so that it's out of sight, out of mind. Again, the budget is considerable. So the issue here is, what else could you have done with this money? Let's say maybe it could have been used for lighting or water supply or such, let's say. So your taxes, your money that you are paying, where is it going? It's going, what do we say, to the waste, let's say, going to waste, right? Again, typical waste management system, you have generation and storage, segregation, reuse, recycling, and then obviously considerable street sweeping and cleaning of public places, because people don't put the waste where they are supposed to, and also because there are not enough storage bins. And then primary waste collection and transport to a transfer station, right? And then secondary collection and transport to a waste disposal site, but it's not in a landfill, it's a dump typically, right? In general aspects. So how much is it that we are dumping? Let's say it's around 2,20,000 estimate per day in urban areas, and we are assuming that we are only generating 500 grams per kg, which is relatively not per kg, pardon me, 500 grams per person, which is what these analysis or estimates are based on. And obviously most of the waste in metro areas is at least collected, but in smaller towns and cities, it's not really. For example, some of you will be getting into this group called Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, where people look at trying to make the lives of the villagers or some of these villages better, let's say, right? And there you see again solid waste is an issue. Why is that? Again, if not remote, they are not easily accessible. What do they do with the waste? They litter them on the streets, right? Litter them on the streets, and the truck or garbage truck will come once in a blue moon if you can call them and pressure them. And again, it just builds over time, pollution, waste and diseases and such, right? So that's what is happening out there. And urban local bodies spend up to 4,000 rupees per ton for collection, transportation, treatment and not disposal. Yes, disposable, not typically treatment. 60 to 70% is spent on street sweeping, 20 to 30% on transportation. Please note that the cost is pretty high, and 5%, only 5% on final disposal, that too if any. Again, the assumption is that we are only, what do we say, generating 500 grams per person, let's say, right? Main problem obviously is that we are dumping it, and that too in an unsegregated manner. So it's adversely affecting obviously aesthetics, but again that's a different issue. We want to keep our house clean, but our country, well, not really, I guess. That's what we have out here, because the typical aspect or mentality, I guess, is that if I do something worthwhile, and if all the other 1,000 guys don't do it, it goes in waste. But that's the whole point, because everyone thinks so, and nobody has the, what do we say, magnanimity, if I may say so, and the guts to take the first step forward. This is where we are rotting in, right? So again, it affects the environment, and thus obviously finally again everything comes back to us. It's the public health, and more importantly, real estate like this, right? You are having remarkable, what do we say, prices of land in urban areas, right? Price of land is very high. So where do you dump it? Nobody wants a dump yard near their homes, right? So, but you still need to dump the waste. Everybody generates waste. Sewage, we are collecting it underground and taking it to the wastewater treatment plant by gravity. Solid waste, what do you do? So these are obviously the issue out here. So typical dump, taken out and dump it there. So dump, I guess the issue is that it does not protect the environment, susceptible to open burning. This is a huge issue with respect to air pollution. And then scavengers and such, again with respect to transmission of disease, let's say, right? Health effects, we discussed this, but some aspects that I did not discuss, it's easily accessible to children, typically slums, right? There are people go there, garbage for collecting the garbage or such, those, what do we say, recyclables and such, and accessible to children, vulnerable to sharp edges and harmful liquids. Okay, rodents, insects, vermin, and then transmission of disease, conceivable transmission of disease. And dump sites with tires provide an ideal breeding ground for mosquitoes, and again transmission of source of disease and transmission, I guess, right? Poisoning and chemical burns resulting from contact with all the hazardous chemical waste mixed with general waste, right? That's another aspect. Methane gas. Recently you might have seen this again. I think this was in Karnataka or outskirts of Bangalore. The people there in the slums, they were cooking, what do we say, their food on the dump yard. And how was it now? It's just that methane was being emitted and they were lighting a fire and capturing that and using it up. But obviously that's not sustainable. The poor person there, he has to live, and that's how he has to find opportunity to minimize his cost. So he's using methane. But people should know better, right? It's going to leach it, as in the leachate is going to pollute the groundwater if there is enough methane to be sent out into the atmosphere, right? Again, different aspects, and I believe, from time to time you are going to have these remarkably big fires. And another aspect of anaerobic decomposition is that when you have sulfur and it is reduced to hydrogen sulfide, this is remarkably toxic. Let's again different toxic compounds or gases are released too, right. So, open dump environment effects, we already discussed this. Air pollution, water pollution, we already mentioned this, so I am not going to repeat that, and obviously soil contamination, right. And again, when we talked about carbon dioxide and CH4, again global warming, but well, that goes with the territory here, I guess. So, what do we do? It is integrated solid waste management. Let me skip the generic stuff. So, what do we want to do? We want to retain as much of the energy that is inherent in this waste, right, and those materials in a useful state, right, and we want to avoid releasing that energy into the environment or the matter into the environment as a pollutant, right. We want to be able to capture the energy or recycle the relevant waste. Let's see that. Another aspect here is that more and more we are now having to or experiencing depletion of resources, right. So, producing something is also going to be an issue because raw materials, getting them and such, it is getting to be considerably difficult, right. And what is it that we have to do? We obviously now have to look at what we say, a circular economy, as in we are not going to waste anything, but whatever we dump, right, we have to reuse that or find ways to what do we say, look at resource recovery, let's say, right. And this again, gentlemen and ladies, is a huge opportunity for people, certainly in India, even abroad, resource recovery, and there are considerable entrepreneurship opportunities in this aspect. That is something to keep in mind. Again, because of what do we say, resource recovery, right, the reclaimed materials and products, and also we have jobs created, obviously the local and regional economies are going to be considerably benefited, right. You are putting something back into the economy that would have actually costed something to, let us say, purchase or get, right, and you are also lessening the problem, right. So, that is something to keep in mind. So, municipal solid waste, obviously based on decomposability, non-decomposable and decomposable. If it is decomposable, you can have biogas generation and use that particular energy, right. And based on combustibility, combustible waste obviously useful from energy point of view, non-combustible waste again different aspects, right. One is decomposability or biodegradability, and the other is how easy is it to burn, if I may say so, so that you can get the energy here. Again different types of waste, but that is something that you can look at because it is pretty much self-explanatory. So, in typical context, we are concerned with dry and wet materials. Why is that? Because we are concerned with moisture content. Why is that? If the moisture content is high, your calorific value and thus your combustibility will be remarkably adversely affected. And also what else do we have here? The unpleasant odors and liquids associated with this garbage is because you have degradation of the organic compounds, which we are calling the wet form. And these materials, they say, are less than 30, but again we see that the total organic fraction is around 50%, right. And from the perspective of recovery, the non-recyclable dry fraction is pretty good. That is something that we already looked at. We are talking about paper, plastics, wood and metals and glasses, right. How do we handle this wet fraction, which is typically biodegradable, right, aerobic or anaerobic bioconversion and landfilling, but rarely combustion though, right. Again general aspects, recyclable waste, again there is a huge market out there, again you can go in there, and vermicomposting and such is something that people are also into with respect to what they do with the organic fraction. Inert debris, again you can use it as recycled aggregate. That is something we already discussed. Example was the Korean company and some companies in India, but right now we are again considerable opportunities for entrepreneurs here, let us say. Inert debris, hazardous waste, you should not dump it, it should be going to an engineered landfill, but obviously that is the relevant scenario out here, right. But all this is only feasible if you segregate it at the source, which is not happening right now in India, in most of the places anyway. So, small towns, how much do they generate? 100 grams per person per day, and in large towns 5 times, which is 500 grams per person per day, right. Total waste generation in India, generic numbers, let us say, right, what is it that we have? 0.54 metric tons per day, right? That seems pretty low. I think that's per day. Again, you can check the calculations, let's say, and 197 metric tons per annum, I guess, right? So I believe I have a better, what do we say, characteristics table. But again, by income, you can see the different, what do we say, characteristics. But let's just compare this column and this column, let's see. So look at the food and garden waste. Here it's relatively higher fraction. Here it's relatively low. But what is higher out here? Obviously, you have the other products that are relatively more recyclable. Here you see that they are relatively less, and out here paper content, textile content and plastics and rubber is relatively high. And another issue is you see that moisture content here is pretty high, but here it's pretty low, let's see, right? And another aspect to keep in mind that with changing lifestyles, the amount of waste generated is also higher, right? That's something to keep in mind. So in India, this is from India or in India, let's see, and this was from a tender, and I believe which city was this? I am unable to recollect that. So as per tender, this is the actual data, not supposed data that we were presenting earlier. The organic or biodegradable fraction was not 30%, not 50%, it was 65%, right? So that tells you what it is, and even the average is around 57%, and they are generating 67.5 tons per day. So that's something to keep in mind. So organic fraction is remarkably high, and inorganic non-recyclable fraction is 22%, I guess. Okay, fine. And recyclables as high as 14%, and what are we concerned about? Glass, metal, paper boards, right? And here we see a lot of plastic and wrapping, what do we say, not equipment, materials and such, and then cloth bags, rubber items and so on, relatively inert, and tree waste, right? So again, you see that organic fraction obviously considerably high, but again you still have a lot of waste that can be reused. Again, circular economy out here, right? This is from actual data out there. So characteristics, physical and chemical, but we will not go into that in greater detail right now. So characteristics of the waste, physical properties that we are typically concerned because we are concerned about management, let's say. They are important to estimate obviously weight and volume, because transportation, disposal and processing, everything depends on the volume, obviously costs, I guess. So what are we concerned with? Specific weight or density, moisture content, which is obviously going to add a lot to your transportation costs and such, and also going to mess up your processing, particle size and distribution, and to a lower extent permeability or hydraulic conductivity. So with respect to chemical properties, let's say moisture, volatiles, ash and carbon. Fusion point, again typically we are concerned with energy content, let's say heating value, and also how much total carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen and oxygen are there, right? Again typical what do we say, chemical properties. So biodegradable fraction is important because you want to estimate how much gas or the energy can be recouped, let's say, right? And another issue here is that when you have this generation, if you have sulfur, you are also going to have generation of hydrogen sulfide. This is remarkably toxic and corrosive. So if you have high amounts of sulfur, obviously in your biomethanation plants, you are going to ruin your system. So you need to have hydrogen sulfide scrubbers. Why I mention this is, a person put in, I think 4 crores or 5 crores. This was in Andhra Pradesh, and I think this was a person who was owning or who owned a sugarcane processing and such company. And biomethanation plant, he got all the relevant feed and such, but without understanding this elemental composition, right, and as and such, he went in for it. And firstly, for biomethanation, you need to have the right carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus ratio. If not, the relevant microbes will not thrive. So that was missing. Secondly, the kind of waste that he was getting, sulfur content was high. So anaerobic conditions prevail, remarkably higher amounts of hydrogen sulfide was given out, and also because of poor, what do we say, elemental composition of your waste, he was not getting a high calorific value output, let's see, and that he wanted to, or he laid the pipeline to give it to a cement factory, not cement factory, pardon me, a tile manufacturing company. And they were in considerable trouble. So that's why I guess again entrepreneurs, you need to be aware of some of the basics before you set up companies, I guess, right? and put in a lot of money. So, transportation systems, why do you need that? Again, these dumps are typically too far, small capacity collection truck, low density area, and more waste to large distance. I guess you want to obviously, what do we say, transport a lot of waste to a larger distance, let us say, right. Small capacity for what do we say, within local communities until you can reach a transport station, right, or transfer station, and from there you will move more waste to a large distance. So, typical aspects, only now are we moving on to these pneumatic and hydraulic systems, but typically, motor vehicles, I guess, are what we are typically concerned with. But again, now we are relatively better off. So, transportation costs, these are consumable costs, and that is why we are just looking at a relevant what do we say, numeric, pretty simple. So, I guess you can read off the slide. So, let me just go through this. Suppose the annualized cost for purchasing, maintaining and fueling is 5 lakhs plus 40,000 into V, let us say, again based on empirical evidence, let us say, right. V is the truck volume, right, okay, rupees per year. So, 5 lakhs thus truck volume, I guess, for by taking a particular truck volume, this is what you end up with. Labor cost, again we have driver, helper, collector at a rupees 1 lakh per year. It is going to be, I guess, 6 lakhs per year, again 1 lakh per year. So, the cost per person is less, but obviously you have 6 people, 6 lakhs per year, right. So, total cost is 13 lakh 80,000 for just one truck, and obviously as you can see, that is a considerable amount. And again, where is all this amount coming from? It is coming from our pockets, let us say, right. So, that is something to keep in mind. So, urban local bodies, again as we mentioned, 60 to 70% on allocation on collection, another 20-30% on transportation. This is what I wanted to highlight, and less than 10%, right, on the treatment and final disposal. Is this sustainable? Certainly not. So, what do we want to do? First, we want to reduce the waste that is coming in or being generated, and recovery or recycle of the relevant what do we say, materials, and then reuse, let us say, right. Reduce, recycle and reuse, again as I mentioned, gentlemen and ladies, considerable entrepreneurship opportunities out here. So, reduction and recycling, obviously it is relatively straightforward, because you want to decrease the volume, obviously decrease the pollution and such, let us say, right. Waste has 3 values: bulk value, food and nutrition value, and energy value, right. Buy less and reuse and recycle, well, it is not worth going into that. Energy content, here is what I wanted to, or this is what I wanted you to look at. So, paper, energy, I guess here we are talking about inert residue out here, I guess, and energy kilojoules per kg, let us see, the range is given out here and the typical value. Let us focus on this particular aspect out here. Paper 16,000, plastics again considerable, cardboard boxes considerable, textiles considerable, rubber considerable, well, and such, wood again considerable, right. Again please note that in our wastes, these are typically 20%, but most of it is food waste. From that tender that we looked at, we saw that 60% or so was, or 65% was food waste, which have a relatively low calorific value, and this is why most of your waste to energy plants that people put up, or I do not know why people still keep putting them up, they fail remarkably big time, right. So, that is something to keep in mind, right. You can look at these relevant numbers and understand why they are infeasible or unfeasible in the long term, right. Okay, let us move on. Biodegradable fraction, right. What do we have? Paper and paperboard 37.6% of MSW, that is a considerable fraction. Percentage of each component that is biodegradable, again paper is, textile, wood, food waste, yard trimmings and miscellaneous inorganics. But as you see, food waste is remarkably biodegradable, and the other some of the other wastes are also biodegradable, but you see a certain amount, not certain amount, considerable fraction of materials that can be reused or recycled go through this particular waste out here, right. Okay, with that, what is the need of the R? Separation and storage at the source. For example, in South Korea, the person was talking about separation into 13 different kinds of containers. And again, if it is not done, they bring the waste back to the person and they have to pay the fine. or they are not just going to stop taking the waste. Again, small wheel carts and all this, okay, plastic, cardboard box, plastic bags for what is it, for plastic bags, plastics and metals, glass, kitchen waste, packaging materials, different ones. So why is this? Because then you will have these bulk suppliers who can come in and just take them. If not, that's not going to be feasible at any case. In India, what do people do? You do have a lot of such, what do we say, ornaments, if I may say so, which are never used. But what's going to happen? Let me skip this general stuff. So you are going to have generation, source separation is planned, right? But it's pretty less, but most of it, I guess, what is it now? Out of your 500 grams, right? Out of your 500 grams, let's say 50 grams is street sweepings and such. Wet waste is 300 grams. Mechanical or manual sorting and press, anaerobic digestion and biogas generation, right? Okay. Compost, obviously, this is something that we also saw in IIT Roorkee. That's what we are trying to achieve in a different manner, right? Inert to landfill, dry waste 100 grams, mechanical and manual sorting to recyclable, and waste to energy or refuse derived fuel, and again you get energy from that, and some of it goes to landfill, I guess, right? So manual separation, it's not feasible. This is what we have to do. But again, this here is the one from a relatively more developed economy, but here it's not wet waste and dry waste, only dry waste, and they are trying to remove some materials that will are more reusable. In India, this is the scenario though. You have the wet waste, dry waste and such. And my dear gentlemen, it costs a lot and nobody wants to work, and it costs a lot, and time also is an issue to be able to sort such waste. So gentlemen, do not dump everything in one bin. So this is the typical case. And again, where do their salaries come from? Again, from the taxes and such. So this is not feasible at all in the long term. So there are two types of sorting, as in negative positive sorting, that recover items that don't need to be processed, as in cardboards, newspapers and metal bars. Negative sorting, as in they want to remove material that will damage their equipment, let's say. So, well maintained facility, this is what it looks like, but again, most or almost no urban local body or municipality can do this, and it's not going to be sustainable in the long term, let's say, right. So that's something that you have to keep in mind, right. Again, sorting stations. So but if we are able to segregate the source at the waste, obviously it's much more easier. We can put the materials back into the economy, right. Or you can also cut down on the waste processing and such, right. So that's a double whammy out there. So I'm almost out of time, so we will quickly wrap up what we have been doing as past time, I guess. The last time we were looking at this map, right. And let me move on to another map, and for this I need to give the reference. So the reference again is out here, Bartholomew and Sons, Edinburgh, Imperial Gazetteer of India. And so this is the reference, I guess. This is from Wikipedia. It's obviously not my map. I need to give that reference. So it's 1765 map, but again 1755 is what I am going to talk about. Again, we see that British territory now, we have at Bengal under British control, but in 55 that was not the case. It was still under the Nawab of Bengal. So where were we at that time? Calcutta. What does this governor do? Not governor, I guess, the commander or such. He starts building up his walls. Why does he build up the walls? Because he thinks that the French navy or such is going to come and attack them. But history, truth, later we come to know that it's not coming to India, but it's going somewhere else. But threatened by the walls that were being built up. Why was this ruler threatened? Because he saw what happened or came to know about what happened in southern India when both France and French and East India trading companies, let's say, or the East India Trading Company and the French company, they hired mercenaries, or they hired their armies as mercenaries and threw southern India into chaos. So he did not want that to be repeated. But this able ruler was almost on his deathbed. Able ruler was Alwaradi Khan, and who supported him? It was the Jagat Seths. If you remember, we discussed about them long time ago. They were used as couriers to send money from here to Delhi. Where is Delhi out here? okay, Delhi, right. The other map showed it under Maratha control, but that was not very much true. Again, 1755 is what we are talking about, but I am using a map from 1765. Jagat Seths, they were propping up this Nawab Alwaradi Khan, but he was a decent ruler, able ruler. But again, people do not want to choose a worthwhile successor. They want to choose a person who is from their own bloodline. And he chose Siraj-ud-Dawla, who it seems was a psychopath and bisexual rapist. And he was a person who always abused his elders and also did not brook any criticism. This is important, right? He did not want to listen to any criticism, any feedback, and he tamped down on such people. And typically, you have reasonable voices being drowned out, right, or bulldozed. And now you will have people who only want to tell you what you want to hear, and there will be a disconnect between reality and the relevant administration here in that context. Again, that was already happening. And after the death of this Nawab, I think in 56 or 55 itself, what's going to happen by the time we see that, assuming that the French are going to land, English guys sent, what do we say, their army or some reinforcements, ships and reinforcements to Madras. In the meantime, this guy Siraj-ud-Dawla, he comes, takes up Qasim Bazar, which is another factory of East India Company, and then attacks, who is this, not who, what, Calcutta again. Why was Calcutta thriving? As I mentioned, raids, right, anarchy, people wanting, what is this, security, and people want security and they want to have better quality of life. That's why they were thriving or going to or migrating to Calcutta, Madras and these centers where security could be provided. In the meantime, what's happening in Delhi, right? Surely the Mughal Empire, one of the greatest empires, and certainly in India and in the world, it can't fall down without throwing up a person, who can maybe at least try to bring the empire back. So in this time, civil war was raging, right? People were fighting for power that was rapidly diminishing, and one guy put up an emperor as a puppet. But the son of this emperor, Shah Alam, he was no puppet, and he seems he was a remarkably learned man, right? Again, he was a what do we say, 25-year-old or 27-year-old person, and we are talking about 1753 or such dates, let's say, right? And this person, courageous, but he was not a person who wanted to go into battle or such. He was a learned man, he was a poet and such, let's say, but he was a wise man. And this guy, he was trying to, what do we say, control the prince. He did not allow that, or he did not find that to be amenable. So when they were trying to kill him, he escaped, he into this area, East India, if I may say so, eastern part of India. Why? He wanted to bring these Nawabs of Awadh and Bengal under his control again so that he can re-establish the Mughal Empire. When people heard that this dashing, promising Mughal, what do we say, prince came about and was trying to establish control, even without any call for arms, as many as 30,000 troops, joined him from different parts of the country of, again, different religions. Why is that? Again, please note that this is the lineage of Akbar, one of the greatest, what do we say, modern empire, builders of India, Ashoka, right, Akbar and such, let's say. Again, please note that, people, crave security and people don't like this anarchy, as you can see, different rulers fighting and so on and so forth. Again, but sadly, history tells us that he was not successful, but more of that later. In the meantime, what happens? This guy Siraj-ud-Dawla comes, captures Calcutta, and then he takes all the treasures or such. He goes back to his capital of Murshidabad. And then what happens is that a person, who is a prisoner, a drunk person, he, shoots at one of his captors, and then the, tone changes and they put everyone in a dungeon, right? And this is something you might have heard of, and not everyone, I think 64 people were put in. And they were suffocated, as in it was poorly lit, there was only one window, 64 people, water there and such, and only 21 people survived. And this is, I guess, mentioned as black hole tragedy or some such, what do we say, tragedy. Why? Because the British later on, used this as an example to show how cruel the Indians were or such. But again, reality is different, myth making is different. People use such incidents to, what do we say, make, what do we say, more impact on humans, right? They want to excite the base feelings of humans. And again, this was one such incident that was used. So Sirajuddaula goes back. In the meantime, what happens? A person lands here. Who is that? That's Robert Clive. You must have heard of Robert Clive or Clive. He was the first governor of the Bengal presidency. More of that later. And again, who is this person? He was born, I think, in 1720s and such, the first governor of Bengal presidency, nobleman and such, not really. He was a hooligan, if I may use this term. He used to break windows in his hometown, right, so that, the people, shopkeepers give him money. He used to flood traders, shops and such. His father or uncle thought, okay, we can't handle him here, let's send him far away. He lands here in India. But here, he was able to look at the opportunity, take care of it. He trained people, right? Andhra, Tamilians and such, again participated in these Carnatic wars, made a lot of money. And then after he made a lot of money, he went back to London. And then what did he do? Similar to the politicians that we see here, we have what are called rotten boroughs, okay? And he was able to buy an MP or parliamentary seat and goes into the parliament there, British parliament. But they kick him out. And right at that moment, the East India Company comes to know that a particular section of French Navy might land at Madras. So they turn to Robert Clive and he returns back to Madras. And so what happens? He sails back up here, and I think the rest is history. People know that. But again, fate and chance, this is what happens. You have a able ruler trying to get back. At that time, fate conspires to, send British reinforcement and Robert Clive here. And I guess, different aspects. The reason I mention this is in this class is, fate again works in mysterious ways, yes. But here the underlying aspects are greed, people not looking at the bigger picture and so on and so forth. For example, only now or yesterday the news was that, fund managers, 41 fund managers of trillions of dollars, let's say, only now did they make the commitment that they will not invest anymore in companies that are not carbon neutral. Keep in mind that we are not on target to meet this 2 centigrade rise in temperature. And if it rises to 3 centigrade rise in temperature compared to the pre-industrial levels, it's going to be catastrophic. And again, still here we are, quibbling. I know it's not just India now, it's the world. Again, it's greed and lack of opportunity, different people with different motives and such. And we looked at some world political leaders again, obviously, who want to only look at their own power and such, right? Again, enough of that for today. And as usual, I thank you for your patience.